and supporters. But it was true. Diana had had a love affair with James Hewitt, James who shortly afterwards became known as the Cad Hewitt, and she was forced to confess that in an hour-long television special in 1995, and this is what she said. The interviewer asked her, "Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?" Diana, "Yes, it did, yes." "Were you unfaithful?" And Diana said of Hewitt, "Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him, but I was very let down." And indeed she was.
But I think if you look at James Hewitt, he's what us British would call sort of the chinless wonder, very much an army wimp of a man. There's no doubting he loved her and Diana loved him. But I don't think it was actually a very sort of intellectual relationship. It was a physical one. She was a very lonely woman looking for something. But I think James Hewitt obviously is another one who betrayed her trust. He liaised with Anna Passenack to write the book Princess in Love, which although it came across as a romantic novel, and everybody sneered at it at the time, saying, "What a lot of rubbish, how could this have happened, how could wonderful Diana have sullied herself?" But of course, it was proved right a couple of years later, when in fact when Diana said, yes, we had the affair, and in more interviews with James Hewitt, it did become clear that a lot of this fictional book, as it was in fact true. She did in fact lead him by the hand and take him to bed, which I think was sort of quite remarkable, and I think it probably shows another side to Diana as well.
Diana's frank confession on television of an adulterous affair with James Hewitt and her further criticisms of the House of Windsor in the same interview was seen by many royal observers as a declaration of war by her on the whole royal family. It was therefore no surprise when the Queen, who was in despair at the unprecedented damage being done to the monarchy, soon after ordered the divorce of Charles and Diana. Diana had agreed to a divorce. At last, she felt free and appeared determined to create a new life for herself.
This was like a new beginning, a new dawn for Diana. She strove to establish herself as an international stateswoman, an ambassador for Britain, she called it, a queen of people's hearts. She got precious little help from the palace and even less from the royal courtiers.
As Diana's brother was to very pointedly say at her funeral, Diana needed no royal title to weave her magic. She became a rather self-appointed ambassador for Britain, but I think looking back, that was such the wisest choice she could have made. People still loved her, and I think she was loved more than anywhere else in America. People still paid thousands of dollars just to not only sit by her side, but attend the very same function that Diana was attending. And you're not talking about small informal gatherings where they had the chance to speak to her, but vast, vast gatherings where people just wanted to be in her presence, so that it was an amazing aura she had. And I think one can understand why perhaps Diana was seriously thinking about settling in America, because she was faultless there. People didn't criticise her. They loved her for what she was. She was completely blameless. And I think you can understand her wanting to be in an environment where they thought perhaps, this is a girl for us, we love her. She can only continue to weave her magic for us.
Diana was also determined to fill her life with her charity work. It seemed to be her release, her way of filling her life. She decided to give her love, for it must have seemed that receiving it was forever going to elude her. Diana's plan was to put the enormous worldwide fascination with her to good use. She chose to use the hordes of photographers in a productive way as they followed her around the world. This and her excellent communication skills meant that she soon became one of the most successful fundraisers ever. At one stage, Diana was associated with some 150 charities and was president or patron of more than 90. Indeed, when she severed links with all but 6 of them, officials estimated that it would cost them a staggering £300 million. Her name remained, however, in backing many of them. Diana concentrated on her special 6 charities, including the leprosy mission, to which she made substantial personal donations as well as raising its profile.
Diana threw herself wholeheartedly into her charity work, sometimes publicly, but more often in private, often secretly, often at night. She would visit hospitals and hold the hands of dying cancer patients. She'd visit hospices. She even took her sons, William and Harry, to a hostel for the homeless, one night, secretly, without publicity.
I met her twice, and like, you couldn't meet a better person, you know. She was just fantastic. I mean, she did things for the homeless people that nobody else could do. And she had time for you, you know. She sat there for hours. She spoke about what you wanted to talk about. If you asked her personal questions, she'd answer them. She was a really, really nice lady, you know. And like her kids as well, I met her 2 kids. She brought her kids in '96 to a hostel in Euston, another cold weather. And William, Harry, they're like really, really good kids. And that's who I really feel sorry for.
From the moment that she cuddled an AIDS victim and the moment that she held a leper's hand, Diane became very much a leading light in charity work. She was like a breath of fresh air, really, because the royal family up until that point had never really been involved in tactile. They never actually cuddled people who were sick. They might go visit them, but never sat on their bedside. And I think this was sort of quite a new dimension. This is probably why people took Diana to their hearts and why she was called Queen of Hearts.
Diana was determined to get involved in charities that were not glossy. Her early involvement in HIV and AIDS charities is now recognised as changing a nation's perception of the disease. And it was Diana's work with children's charities that gave us such memorable images. She had time for everybody and lit up a room when she entered it. She gave her full backing to the plight of landmine sufferers, travelling to Angola and Bosnia to see for herself the devastation landmines cause. When she flew to Angola, one of the world's most heavily mined countries, to highlight the campaign, she finally believed she had achieved her stated aim of linking the public's unending fascination with her to making a tangible difference to the lives of others. I hope, she told the press pack who followed her, that by working together we shall focus world attention on this vital, but until now largely neglected, issue. Her visit was clouded in controversy when a Conservative minister branded her a loose cannon, and others accused her of being uninformed about the landmines issue. But although Diana was initially shocked and dismayed at the row that she had unwittingly stirred up, she refused to let it shake her determination to try to solve the horrific problem. "All I'm trying to do is help," she said. She was a guiding light to all the charities she supported.
Another of Diana's main concerns, of course, was to protect the children, and she's always aware that some damning press report might come out which would hurt them. So she'd always, if a particular damning report was due, she'd go down to see William at school and say, "William, this is the situation. Please don't believe what you're going to read. Mummy and Daddies do still love you. Whatever is said in the papers will always be here for you. Don't believe these lies." And an interesting fact was that as William grew older, the roles seemed to reverse somewhat, and Diana was no longer the one that supported him. He became a shoulder to cry on. He actually became very grown up, and he would sort of advise his own mother on how to sort of deal with the press, how to be a little bit stronger. And I'm sure there are many times he'd sort of say, "Mummy, please don't cry. We love you very much. You know, be strong for us, and I'll always be there for you."
Diana's immersion in her charity work and her devotion to her 2 sons was almost overshadowed by her love-hate relationship with the world's press, especially the paparazzi.
Diana knew very well how to manipulate the press to her own advantage and to the advantage of her charities. But it was a two-way thing. She couldn't take the pressure of the constant attention, which after all had been upon her since she was just 17 or 18 years of age. And eventually it became all too much. She would often be photographed running tearful away from the cameras, not smiling at them.
And you heard horrendous stories of paparazzi who would crawl on stomachs to get under windows. There was this great network of wherever she went on a plane, somebody would be tipped off. Every private visit to a doctor, somebody would be tipped off, somebody would be waiting there. And I think it must have taken its toll. I'm very surprised that she wasn't completely unhinged by it, because to have that amount of pressure would not do anybody any good, no matter how gorgeous Diana always looked for the cameras.
With the continual hounding by the press, it was only a matter of time before the world would discover that Diana had possibly, at long last, finally found love.
She was photographed in August 1997 in the south of France with Dodi Fayed, the film producer son of Mohammed Al Fayed, owner of London store Harrods.
The two were very, very close. And in fact, they'd known each other a lot longer than the press would lead us to believe. Diana was introducing Dodi as her boyfriend, several months before the press latched onto it. And they were very tactile, they were very loving, very cuddling, and perhaps that's what Diana missed and that's what she wanted.
She was making no secret of the fact that she was at last in love. In the early hours of Sunday, August the 31st, 1997, Diana and Dodi, having dined at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, stepped into the back of a Mercedes and were driven at high speed to Dodi's Paris home. The Mercedes swept into an underpass beside the River Seine and lost control. The driver and Dodi died instantly. A 3-hour operation ensued in a Paris hospital, a battle for Diana's life. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, the doctors announced that they had failed. Within minutes, the news wires around the world were running red hot with the news that nobody could have predicted and no one wanted to believe.
Within hours of Diana's death, tributes were pouring in from people around the world. Instead of the usual exaggerated messages of sympathy, the tributes to Diana were direct and personal, to a woman who sincerely wanted to help those who needed it most. Tens of thousands camped out overnight to pay Diana their final respects. The streets of London were packed with crowds comparable to those on VE Day in 1945. Many wept openly, unashamed to show their sorrow. Most, though, simply stood in silence, heads bowed, alone with their thoughts and prayers for the woman they had never known, but who touched their lives so profoundly. The unique Diana was breaking traditions even now, on her funeral day. The Queen bowed as Diana's coffin passed, and Britain's National Union flag rose above the palace for the first time ever, before it was lowered to half-mast. Never before had a country mourned so openly.
The moment that we heard the news, Britain reacted in a way that I don't think history will ever see again. The style of mourning was phenomenal. People came in droves to London to stand outside Diana's home and Buckingham Palace and to cry for the princess that they loved. And I think that it was interesting that because Diana was very much the people's princess, her people reacted in the way that she would have expected, from the heart. The tears were real. They weren't ashamed to show their emotion.
There was a spontaneous outpouring of grief by the British public, and then of anger, at first directed against the paparazzi who, again, had been pursuing Diana that night, the night of her death, then against the driver of the car, who, it appeared, had been drinking, and finally, and astonishingly, against the royal family themselves, against the senior members, against the Queen. The British public felt that the Queen had not adequately shown her own grief. The family was tucked away safely in Balmoral. Charles had come to London. His sons had come to London to see their mother's body, but the Queen had not. And it was a critical moment for the House of Windsor. Eventually, the public won. The Queen, Prince Philip, and the rest of the royals did come down, and the flag was at last flown at half-mast on top of Buckingham Palace.
On the stroke of 9, 6 horses and soldiers from the King's Troop and the Welsh Guards walked into the gaze of over 2 billion people worldwide. And in London, over 2 million people had come to say goodbye to their princess. When the funeral cortege reached St. James's Palace, It was joined by the Princes William and Harry and Diana's brother Charles, who had taken such an active role in the planning of the day. Behind them walked 500 charity workers. The service at Westminster Abbey was attended by 1,800 of Diana's friends. Celebrities, charity workers and heads of state all came together. Her brother wanted it to be a family funeral to be shared by the people. From London, the cortege moved to the Spencer ancestral home, Althorp House, 77 miles away in the county of Northamptonshire. Diana was buried later that day on a beautiful island in the middle of an ornamental lake. It was her father's favourite spot.
Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice, but for those